Hi, welcome to a bonus episode of the PassionKnit Spinner podcast. My name is Tracy. You can find me as Schnüffeltier on Ravelry and Instagram. I am going to do a little bonus episode today, and I'm going to talk about this sweater that I'm wearing right now. This sweater came to life with a lot of thinking involved, and this is what I'm going to talk you through. So, I found the pattern in this German knitting magazine. It's Sabrina Strickjournal, issue 1, 2018. And I fell in love with the sweater immediately. And I decided that I needed to have this sweater, but I wanted to use my hand spun. And you know, hand spun is very different from commercially spun yarns. So this is what the original sweater looks like. And I'm going to stand up and show you what my version looks like, because I think it looks very similar, you know. I have these ribs, I have the cables, I have the ribs again at the top of the sleeves and some cables down here. The only difference is the bottom of the sleeve that I did very different, and that has a very good reason. So what I did first, I checked my yardage and my gauge, which I hate doing gauge swatches, but if you're changing yarn drastically, you have to do a gauge swatch. And my change was not that drastic. In the end, the pattern calls for 19 stitches for 10 centimeters in stockinette stitch. I did my gauge swatch and I ended up with 18 stitches, which is, you know, not that bad. But then I had the problem of the sizing given in the pattern. No, du kannst nicht hoch. My cat just wanted to jump up. As this is a German knitting magazine, you do not get your sizes in bust circumference like you do with the international patterns, you know. You get German confection sizes, and these are very different from bust size. So the sweater is given in 3 sizes, and these sizes are 36-38, 40-42, and 44-46. So I am a 38-40. You know, that's my problem. So the pattern was either going to be too small or too big. So I did, like I said, my gauge swatch, and then I did the math. And the math is what I'm going to talk you through right now. So here is what I came up with. My gauge, MAPRO, is a German acronym for Maschenprobe, which means gauge swatch. So my gauge swatch was 18 stitches for 10 centimeters. And then I looked in the pattern. The size 36-38 would have 192 stitches all around. For the next size, the 40-42, it would be 208 stitches. So that's a difference of 16 stitches. And then I did the math. And the math is the crucial point here. And it is a very simple. So what do? You use the stitches that you should cast on altogether. You time them by 10 and divide them by 18. It's called Dreisatz. It's very simple. I have no idea what it's called in English, but it is quite simple. You take this number, times it by 10, divide it by 18, and that will give you the centimeters that these stitches will be in the end. And I did that for both of my versions. So I did 192 times 10 is 1,920, divided by 18, and that gives me 106. And then I did the same thing for the version 80, for, you know, the larger size, which is a 40-42, and that has 208 stitches altogether. So I did 208 times 10, which is 2,080, divided by 18, which is the stitches to 10 centimeters, and that will result in 115 centimeters. So what is also important when you do this, you need to know your measurements. And my measurements are quite simple. You know, I have 115 centimeters hip circumference. That's roughly 43 to 45 inches, somewhere in there. So I knew that I had to do this size for the bottom, but this size would still be too big at the top. So I started out. I started knitting this sweater with the back. Normally, I start with the front, but I also just like doing what the pattern tells me, and they start with the back. So I did start the back, and I decided, as I needed 115 for the hips, I started with the larger size. So I cast on the 104 stitches, that's half, you know, of what I need in the end for the bigger size. And from the waist on, because you do waist decrease, you do not decrease anything. It's a straight sweater in the pattern. I did waist decreases, and I decreased down to the stitch number for the smaller size to make it wider at the bottom and smaller at the top, because that is my body shape. I'm wider at the bottom, smaller at the top. And then I finished the sweater off with the numbers for the smallest size. That will also mean that I have to do the sleeve cap, you know, the raglan for the smallest size, because otherwise it will not match. So that's a very important thing to consider. Then when I started the front of the sweater, I decided to go for the smaller size altogether and not do any decreases. And I did. I started the front for the smallest size, which should have ended up in a sweater that's going to be a bit snug at the bottom. But because of the stretchiness of the fabric, it worked out wonderfully. So I knit the front and the sleeves and everything, basically, for the smallest size, except for the back bottom part. So what I also had to do, I was very short on yarn. So I knew that I might not be able to finish the sweater if I do it as it's written. So I finished the back of the sweater and I finished the front. And then I thought, okay, what now? Because this is a bottom-up pieced sweater that's then sewn together, and then you add the neckline. And I knew that I couldn't do that because, you know, if I run out up here and I don't have enough for the neckline, that's just going to look very stupid. So what I did instead, these sleeves have two different patterns. They have this ribbing pattern and the cable pattern. So I did provisional cast-ons here and knit this piece from the bottom up on a provisional cast-on. So I knit both raglan, these are just the raglan parts of the sleeves first. I provisionally cast on, I knit them up, then I pinned everything together and I knit the neckline with everything still loose, you know, I didn't seam together anything. And after I had finished the neckline, I picked up the stitches for the sleeves and I knit them 2 at a time, top down. The reason why this worked out wonderfully, and you cannot tell, is the change in patterning. If it would be this pattern all the way up, you could definitely tell, because if you do a provisional cast on and you start knitting in the other direction, first of all, your stitches are in the different direction and you can tell, but also it shifts for half a stitch. So you can always, it looks like there's a break somewhere. And that, like I said, because of the pattern being different up here than down here, you cannot tell. You can't even see that there was something done differently. So I had finished everything except for the bottom part of the sleeves. And then I had to put it away because my arms started to hurt because I was knitting on this like a mad woman. And then I took it back out and I had 2 skeins attached to the sleeves. So I knit until I ran out of one of the skeins. And then I used the remaining skein and I knit that one from the outside and the inside at the same time. And it worked out in the end that I had just enough left to seam everything together. So I used up every single last bit of this yarn. What I also didn't do, when you look back at the pattern, it has you do the same patterning that you have on the front of the sweater with the, you know, meeting cables. They have you do that on the sleeve here. I didn't do that because I knit my sleeves top down, you know, from here on I knit them down. So I didn't do this because I had no idea when I should start getting the cables apart, and just not knowing when I would run out of yarn. And also I think because of my yarn is so busy compared to their light gray version, you know, I didn't want to put any more pattern in because I thought it would just be too overwhelming in the end. So I did do the decreases as they have written to do the increases, because I did it the other way around, and I'm not sure why, but it did work out perfectly, and I'm quite astounded actually myself that this worked out so nicely. What I found with this pattern. It's a German pattern. I'm going to show you the pattern because you cannot do anything with it. So the pattern starts here. It tells you which yarn to use, which needles to use, and it tells you how to do different things. And this is that's the pattern. That is it. And over here is knitting the charts and the outline of the finished sweater. That's the whole pattern. So you have to think about everything at all times. And I found that very difficult for me because I used to knit only German patterns before Ravelry came around. And then Ravelry happened. And then I knit English patterns and I thought, this pattern is extremely long. What the hell is going on here? And then I thought, oh, this is nice. They tell you everything. That's so much easier. And it really is. It's so much easier. I had to think a lot when I made this sweater, you know, all the time. But it worked out, you know, you can knit almost everything you set your mind to. If the pattern works, that's you know, crucial point. If the pattern works and it is correct, and you have the skill needed, cabling, decreasing stitches, increasing stitches, seaming stuff together, knit stitch, purl stitch. That's basically everything that you need for this sweater. And you can do it. You can knit whatever you want if you just want to. You know, if you sit down, take a moment time, grab a cup of coffee, and just think about stuff, or just do it while you're thinking, this will help. So I'm not sure if I should talk you again through my process of the math, but I think it was very clear because it is so simple. You need to get a gauge. You need to get your gauge if you want to modify anything. I could have made this sweater out of a fingering weight if I had done a gauge swatch. So let's do this. I'm gonna get a piece of paper and the pen. So let's say I would have wanted to do this sweater in a fingering weight, and I had a sport weight, and my gauge was 25 stitches to 10 centimeters. So this is what it looks like. 25 for 10 centimeters. And then I would go for the last two sizes because, you know, I would know that the smallest size would never work. So the last two sizes are 208 altogether or 220. So what do you do? I'm going to show you again. Maybe I'm gonna just do some colorful embellishments here. So first thing, oh, this is fun. Okay, what you do your 28, your 208. That's the cast on stitch amount. You have to check your pattern. You have to find out how many stitches they will cast on, and you need to know your own measurements. Without those, all of this is just not worth doing because, you know, if you don't know what you need to end up with, there's no point of doing it. So you have, for the one size, 208 stitches all together for the cast on. You times that by 10, and then you divide it by 25. So I'm going to do that on my phone real quick because, you know, I'm very good at this kind of math, but my brain math isn't working. So I have 208 times 10. That's 2080. And then I'm going to divide it by 25 because that is the gauge I'm getting. And that will result in a width, in a circumference for the whole sweater in this gauge of 83.2 centimeters. Now that's not fitting me at all. No way. I know that. It also, just looking at it, I know already that even the larger size won't fit. So I'm going to write down 83 stitches or 83 centimeters. That's what this will give me. So now we will do the same with the bigger numbers. I'm going to take the 220. That's the total amount of cast on stitches. I'm going to times them by 10, which is 2,200. And then I'm going to divide by 25, which is my achieved gauge. And that will result in 88 centimeters all the way around. So I know that I cannot use this pattern for the fingering weight or, you know, whatever yarn I use to get my 25 stitches gauge, because these are the largest two patterns instructions given. You can of course use it, but you have to do a lot of more math because you have to find out everything for yourself. You can just use the pattern as a guideline. And for something that's as involved as this, I wouldn't dare. For a stockinette sweater, I would, but not for something like this. So this is the only crucial part of math that you have to get through. Do a gauge swatch, know your measurements, and then you just take the total amount of stitches that you need to cast on, or if it's a top-down sweater, you need to do this either for the stitches that you have around the bust and do it for the bust measurement, or for the stitches that you're going to cast off in the end. That's the important bit, you know? And then use those stitches, times them by 10, and divide them by the gauge that you achieved. And that will give you the centimeters that you should have in the end for the sweater. This is the only thing you need to do. And I hope it makes sense to you. It does make sense to me. It is how I work out everything if I change gauge or yarn. And also, you know, for this sweater that I just finished, I was off 1 stitch. Who cares about 1 stitch, really? I mean, it's not that much. But if I were off 3 stitches, that would be a problem. You know, I can't just say, oh, I'm just going to go for this size and it's going to end up too big or too small in the end. So I need to do my math. And I do this math for every sweater that I start because I want to know exactly if it will fit in the end or not. So I do my gauge swatch and I do the little bit of math. I'm always asking my husband if I did it correctly because, you know, better double check. I'm not doing the math for something like the Flex Light because I have knit fingering weight sweaters for myself before, and I know that roughly the amount of stitches should work out, you know? So I look at the pattern and I look at how many stitches they have for around the bust, and I know, okay, that was a bit too much for the last sweater, or it wasn't enough for the last sweater, so I'm just gonna eyeball it. But everything that I start new or that I substitute the yarn weight in any way, I do this simple math. I'm going to show it to you again because it really is not hard. It's super simple, and I think everyone can do this. So I hope this will help you with your sweaters. I hope you might be brave enough to just use whatever you have in your stash and make it work. I'm not saying that you can use a bulky weight for a fingering weight sweater. You know, it probably will not work, and vice versa. The easy thing for me and my size, I'm almost always in the middle. So I have a lot of way down that I can change things, and I have way up that I can change things. So if I use a yarn that's smaller, I can go up. And if I have a yarn that's thicker, I can go down. But if you are at either end of the spectrum of sizes, you have to do a lot of math if you want to substitute stuff. That's a thing it's not my fault. I'm sorry. That's just how it goes. So for me, it's simple because I always have a couple of sizes in either way that I can just, you know, do my gauge swatch and do the math, and I can see, okay, I need to cast on a size 2XL to end up with my L that I need. Or I can go for the S this time because I'm using way thicker yarn. And that is just what I enjoy about my knitting. I probably do whatever I want. Can use the yarn that I enjoy, and I can make it work with this simple bit of math. That's the only thing that's important. Do this math and you can knit your sweater with the yarn that you want. So I hope this will help you. I really hope this will help you. If not, tell me and let me know what was unclear, and I can hopefully help you out. So I'm going to go. I hope you all have a wonderful time. See you in the next episode of my normal podcast. And until then, enjoy everything you do. Bye.